As you can see from the thumbnail, I made a leather bullet holder for the end of a 4570. It was a request from my husband if I could make one out of leather. So this is the journey of how I went from not knowing really much about them. I looked at a couple of photos on the internet to get a general idea, and this is what I came up with. Please stick around.
The first thing I did was grab a rectangular piece of cardboard. I just used a Jats box and then marked out the angles I wanted. Basically, I cut it to match the angles of the stock already, and I made it just a little bit wider and longer than I needed to see if I needed to tweak it later on. And you can see I sticky taped some extra pieces on because I needed more angle instead of just a straight edge.
The other part is to measure out how wide the bullets are going to be and how many. I think in the photos I've seen 6 as the most common number. So I'll have to map out and draw how I'm going to fit 6 in there evenly, and then do my holes down here for the lace-up effect with the eyelets. So for the heck of it, I've written down my measurements that I'm using in case you're interested. And yes, I work in inches because sewing, I work in inches, so that's just how I do things in life. I did 6.5 inches wide at the top and then splayed it out to 7 at the bottom. This ended up being 3 inches, and the long end at the back was 4 3/4. Now, I did give myself a little bigger wiggle room with the depth here because it's better for me to be able to cut off some extra materials if I do make this a little bit too long. I definitely want to be able to shorten it. Can't lengthen it if I cut it out too short.
I can't remember what the name of this little tool is, but it's very pointy, so I use it to mark the leather at points where I might like to have a reference, and it also makes a little line on it when you drag it across like this.
So I tried to do a quick little map out of where I'm going to put the bullets in here, and I understand how you do it and everything, but I've never done this. So you've got to attach this piece here onto the actual piece of leather, or that way, and then I've got to make sure there's enough room to stitch it down and then stitch in the middle between them all, but map them out evenly so that I can get the 6 bullets in there. So it's just that mapping it out part to make sure I make it all even is that I'm not really 100% sure about. But that is going to probably be my next step, measuring it out. And I cut this strip 1 inch wide, and I made it long so that it hopefully should take up all the room I need to be able to do this.
Now I've laid my stencil over the top of the piece of leather, and I'm going to use my little pointy stabby tool to mark out along the line that is where the bullet holder is going to go. And it will just leave little holes on the actual leather that I can look as a reference once I take the stencil off. This camera isn't picking them up very well, but the little holes are clearly visible to me, so now I know where my leather strap has to go to hopefully keep it straight.
Like this. All right, here's how I'm going to do this. I've started in the middle because that's going to just make my brain work better. Then I'm going to get the bullet, and I want 3 on each side. So I just push it down with my fingers to find out how snug it is, how tight, and then estimate where I want my stitch line to be. And I held this little pointy tool here and then got another shell to see if it would work. And I can easily get 3 along here on each side. So I'm happy with that. So I can do 1 bullet at a time. And I'm just holding it there, which feels nice. So that's where I'm going to then mark, pushing with this to go through the leather. where I want my next lot of stitches to be. That's where my next lot of stitch line is going to be. When you push through with that tool, it marks the other side. So now I get my awl, which does have a bent tip. Bear with me, I only have one tip. I need to get a new one. But so now I have to punch through with the awl. I'm going to do one layer at a time. I'm going to do my top. And when you do these, you don't go straight. You don't make the awl horizontal or vertical. You have to go in at an angle. So the blade, you can tell, is skinny and wide. You have to make it go diagonally in here. This is how I was taught. So I'll put some in and then show you what I mean. So it makes like a diamond kind of shape. And you want that to be going at an angle, not straight up and down or completely horizontal. I'm really hoping this stays as tight as I want it. So that's what it will look like from the top. These lines are here, which will then match up to the ones on the bottom. I'm using this braided, we can't see it very well, braided thread stuff, whatever the main actual name of it is, I don't know, and 2 needles. Pull out a fair amount so that you don't end up short. So I'm probably, I don't know, 18 inches or so doubled up in half. Need to switch the camera angle. Okay. So here is my thread. I'm not going to go into proper detail of the whole stitching thing because it's just probably going to take too long and it's going to slow me down a lot. So I'll just show you how I put it on the needle. Because it's braided, you can go through a bit, like at least half an inch from the end. You push it through the middle of it, pull it down over the top, and then that should hopefully secure it and it won't pull out while you're stitching. Make it longer if you have to, because sometimes it does kind of undo, but I'm only doing little quick ones, so I'm hoping that this will hold. Time to stitch. Starting at the top. Pull it through to halfway, so make them meet and pull it out evenly. And then you're basically doing this through your stitch holes. They're both going through the same hole but from opposite ends. So you're going to start with the next hole. And it does get tight, so you have yourself a pair of little pliers, which I will show you that I use. And I deliberately didn't make my awl holes too big. I didn't push the whole bit of the awl through. I only went to maybe this deep. I finished there instead of going all the way up to here because I don't want a super huge hole. I want it to be nice and tight. That if the hole's too big, I don't like it because you feel like you have to fill it through a thread, like going back and forth through it heaps to fill it up. So I just prefer the smaller hole. So now you've got both threads on one side. Then you get the first one that you didn't pull through, the one that started on this side, and put it through the hole that you just went through with the other thread. Very, come on, let's go. So you always, at the end of your stitch, basically, you have one needle and thread on each side of your work, and just keep going that way. And do it up and back. Depends what your preference is. I like to just do it twice, up and then back. That's how I do it. Sometimes, because it's so tight, the needle, it gets tight to pull through. So it's handy to have a pair of these to help pull it through. Be careful not to get yourself instead of the leather. They look blunt, but they're actually quite sharp. Alright, I have to change one thing. My husband came home, got a real bullet, so it's weighted and everything, and he said this isn't tight enough, so he wants it a little bit tighter. What I have to do with the two I've just done is do an extra stitch now closer to the bullet, so that, you know, if the gun was to end up upside down or anything, that it's not going to fall out. Let's see, is this one? If you put that one in halfway, it probably would at some point. But yeah, so I just need to make those two a little bit closer fit now. So I finally got all 6 done, with me trying to tighten them up on this side first. I ended up with all double stitches. So instead of making it look weird and then making it tight properly on this side, I just did double stitches on every single one to make it look uniform. And I went a little bit wonky going up this side, but all in all, I'm fairly happy with it. And what was this? So they're actually quite snug, and it's hard to get the empty shells in now because they don't have a tapered tip. So it got a little bit difficult, which is actually good because that means these balls are in pretty good. So happy with that. I'm going to trim the end on each side to make that try and look symmetrical. And then my husband said he wants some sort of patterning or something around on it. So I'm going to have to think about what to do there.
So it's looking good. I don't need to trim it anywhere or change it, but I do need to just see where my eyelet holes need to go next. And also my husband doesn't want the strap that goes around the back end of the butt. So I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that to try and keep it more still and not slip on the gun.
Right. So this is where I'm at. I did this side, and because I suck at trying to work out things with the ruler and everything, I got my corner ones marked out first, and then I honestly just got 4 because I wanted 6 holes altogether. I got 4 of these basically and just laid them out like this. I did them upside down. I've got my 4 and just eyeballed how evenly apart they were, and because I had these holes punched already, figured out where I wanted them. And then when they looked good to me, then I got this, my little punch thing, and put a whole little tiny dot right in the middle of every one. Then I got them out of the way and then punched the holes so I could then put these in. So after I put this side on, I then just folded it in half and then lined up the edges properly, and then went through the middle and put the marks down so that now I have the marks for my next side. That's how I did it. Time to punch these holes. Done. Now you get the long one for the underneath part. which goes with a shorter top one. Bottom one in, more one on top. You do need a hard surface. I use this little metal thing, hammer on, put the top on there like so. This is actually a hole punch for these, which they give you to use for this, but I didn't need to use it. They recommend, I think, just using this to make the rivets go in properly, but I don't like the finish. I'll show you. When I just used, where is it? When I just used this one, the mushroom shaped one, to do it, I don't know if you can see, but it made like a mushroom effect, like when you shoot something and it split all of this, and I don't like it because it can scratch the wood on the gun or anything like that. So I use this one first in the middle and then this one, and it makes a better finish. Makes it more like that. So that's how I'm doing it. And I do move it in a round circle kind of way to try and get it all even. That's how I get them in. For the finishing touches, if I do end up putting some patterns on this, I better just tidy up the edges. We've got the edge beveler, which you go along the edges on and just take off that basically sharp corner of the leather. Now ideally, I probably should have done this before I even put those eyelets in, but I think they're far enough away for me to be able to cope with it. So you'll do the top and the bottom of your leather. I'm going to try using the beeswax, which I haven't used before. You use this, you rub it on the edges, and then you use your edge slicker to rub back and forth over it to basically heat the wax up and get it into here, which will then make this not so coarse and fibery. It'll just give it a nice finish instead of it looking rough. Also, to finish off the stitching, I've got these little taggy ends, which I've left deliberately. You just want to get a cigarette lighter and kind of melt them to stop them fraying even further. Careful not to actually melt the stitching that you've done. And it just holds them in place better, less chance of them undoing in the future. So that's basically rub it on. Now I can't do this probably because of the way I'm holding the camera, but you just try and get it in there a fair bit like this. From what I remember, if I'm doing this wrong, somebody correct me. And then you, yeah, that's what I'm going to keep on doing. Here's the next step. The husband wants 45/70 on it. So I'm going to attempt to cut this out with this. Cut it out and then use this as a stencil to mark it on here and then make some impressions around it so it stands out. I've had an idea. I've had a brainwave actually. Instead of cutting it out, I wonder I haven't done much stenciling on leather, so bear with me. I use my pointy tool, and if I put it on the leather, this, can I not just do the points around and say mark it like I've been doing, and then I can get the ruler to straighten up the edges and everything, and actually, yeah, I'm going to try that. Just wait, I'm busy.
Finally getting to the end of this. I just used that tool that I did around the edge to do around the numbers as well, so they stand out a bit. And possibly I'm going to dye these numbers black, because my husband, he's giving me all sorts of ideas that he wants. With the edge here, I made 1 centimeter holes with my little punching tool and just did a basic crisscross stitch one direction all the way down like a shoelace, and then on the way back I just looped back up and down, back and forth, to make this straight stitch along here, just because my husband wanted something on the edge. So I'm gonna have to let that dry, and now I'll have to make up the basically a rope or whatever to tie through this, and I will probably use some of this to either plait together or weave to make a kind of string or small rope. So here I've cut 8 lengths all up, 4 of each black and tan. I've cut them 1.5 meters long because it's going to be too much. It's too much, but 1.5 meters long, just so that I have enough to play with to see if I'm happy with the results of this when I'm done. And I'm just doing basically a 4-strand braid. This isn't really a video of showing you how to do it. It will look like it's a flat braid. I was going to do something round, but changed my mind. Finally got it complete. Now, because this one doesn't have a back strap to go around the back of the butt, I'm going to try and use some of this non-slip stuff to put on the inside, and then just wrap this around it and see if it will stay and not move on the gun. Jeez, that's actually really good. I can't move it. I want it to line up with this. And it's so tight that I can't move it. I guess that stuff is going to work, so that's good.